So before we start on the topic, I wanted to ask you. So Daniel, what is I'm kind of recording now. So Daniel, what do you think about that idea? Because I think the challenge, one of the challenges with, I just wait for a couple people to come in before we start. But I think one of the challenges, with, and again, I won't know until I'm physically there. You know what I'm saying? But one of the challenges is like you were saying, it's like it seems like the people who are like Igbo have their thing, and then the other tribes kind of like have their thing, but they do agree with the Israelite aspect. So like, how's that? How do you see that working?
Um, the fact is that how would I even describe it? There is no big difference between um
Hmm.
the Igbo and the other tribes, because even many of us still have the same similarities, culture, and similar to what is applicable to Israelites. And yes, so but just the name that brings that distinction. But everything that we do is almost the same thing.
Mm. So like,
Yeah.
is that a perspective that you have? I mean, that the youth, like people who are younger, because the elders, when I kind of talked to them about like the concept and like how we were talking, they were like, "Well, the Igbos, we see it this way, and they see it that way." The older people say that, but the younger people don't say that. It doesn't sound like.
The fact is that, just like you said, the elders, I don't know how to describe it, but people like us, we don't see
Mm.
anything big there. We don't see something very big among all those things. It just, the, I don't know how to describe it. I don't know. The Igbo will want to say, sometimes they will say,
You went out for a second. You there?
yeah.
I couldn't hear you for a second.
So personally, someone like me, I don't see any problem there.
Hmm.
It's just like everybody, the name is something that brings the confusion. And because to us, people like the young people, we don't want all those things to divide us. Because
Okay.
once you make mention of the Igbo, this person will feel they are not part of it, because you feel you are the only person there, while we are everybody. It's everybody, and that is it. So when it's mentioned Igbo, it brings division, and sometimes it looks like political something. So we the
Mm.
youth, we are trying to like, no, 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 we don't want to bring all this idea of Igbo, and all of us are together. So why not use a singular term that define all of us? And we say we are Nigerian Jewish youth, and not Igbo Jewish youth, and all of that.
That's
Because
smart.
because if you say the Igbo Jewish youth, you won't say, you will not see a lot of people that used to see come around, because people will feel like, no, we do our things. But if you say Nigerian Jewish, you see everyone come out. There is no division, there is no politics, and we try to minimize all level of politics. But once you mention Igbo, other person feel like it's a political something that they want to use Igbo to maybe bring lower other peoples down, and it sounds so political and for personal or interest, all of that. So we prefer to define us as Nigerian Jews, Nigerian Jewish youth. That is it.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear that. I hear that. Because you had all those, you had like, I mean, you had like Biafra, all these different things. So you're saying that like, if you go into that, then it could be associated with other political movements that happened in the
Yeah,
past.
yeah. Once and Rudy has a problem last time he came. Before
Mm.
this last one he came, because
Mm.
uh, because of the idea of Biafra and all of that. And this
Mm.
Biafra is too much common in the Igbo, among the Igbos. So other parts are not part of the Biafra. They are not supporting the Biafra. So once you bring Judaism to Biafra, you see a lot of other groups coming into it and wanting to hijack into political something. So that is why we on the
Mm.
Nigerian Youth Platform, we try to distance ourselves and try to also define what Judaism is all about here and what we do, and that it has nothing to do with Biafra, so that people will not put us into problem with the government.
Yeah, it's smart. Yeah, because we don't. I mean, I don't have any. I'm spiritual. You know what I mean. I don't have any political. Damn,
Yeah,
but in terms of politics, let me ask you this. So I was looking at the presidential run years ago, and it's a guy. What's his name? Umri. Umri. He ran for president.
Who is that one?
I think his name is hold on. Oh, Peter. Sorry.
Okay, Peter Obi.
Yeah, Peter Obi. Sorry. Yeah, Peter Obi. Yeah, he seems like a nice guy. No.
Yeah. He's a nice guy.
Yeah, he seems like a nice guy. So is he going to run again, type of thing, or no?
We are not. We are just watching them, but it seems he still want to run again. But we don't know how it will be like. We
Wow.
don't know.
And the next presidential run is when?
That will be 2027. I think next 2 years or 1 year plus.
Oh, okay, so he's because he's doing a lot of speeches in America.
Yeah, I know.
He's doing a
I
lot.
follow.
Oh, you do follow him. Okay, so you're doing a lot. So I was like thinking, like, is that like a pre thing before?
Election.
Yeah, interesting. All right. Anyway, so yeah, so yeah, it's a lot to deal with, and let me ask you, so like, what is the response to the government with
About
what you guys are doing? The Jewish, like, how do they not care? I mean, do they aware of it? Like, how do they see it?
definitely Nigerian government is aware,
Hmm.
but they don't give much attention to it. Where we wanted to have problem with the government was when the idea of Biafra was being attributed to Judaism in Nigeria. That is
Ah,
where we begin to have problem. Yes, because Nigerian government doesn't support Biafra. They prescribe it as a terrorist organization and all
wow.
of that. Yes. So once that time that Rudy came up, they used the idea, the Igbos and the Biafras, the supporters of Biafras, projected Judaism into the Biafra. And that is how Rudy was being arrested and interrogated and locked up for a long time.
Because they thought he was part of Biafra.
Yes. Because the Biafra also used the word Judaism and saying Israel is supporting Biafra and they are all Jews and all of that, but they don't believe in returning or maybe like one or something like that. So they were rooting, and sometimes we see that their roots or their aspirate or their campaign about Jews and Israel supporting them is being political, looking for foreign supporters to see how they can get the freedom. So Nigerian government see it as an opposition and against the government and as a terrorist organization, as they said, as they prescribe. So once they see you attach yourself to it, they feel you are a suspect and it can lead you to problem.
Wow.
So
Wow,
that
wow,
is how
wow, wow.
Rudy was being arrested, got arrested, and all of that. But I think we have tried to distance ourselves from all of those things now, and we have tried to also educate our people. If they are fighting for freedom, they should focus on their freedom. They should stop linking Jewish life or Jewish identity to Biafra because it caused a lot of problems in some eastern part
Is
of
this
the.
still is it still a thing now or no?
No, for now it has stopped.
Okay.
Because we have tried to make sure that we enlighten a lot of our people, distance yourself from the issue of Biafra. If you are doing Judaism, focus on your Jewish perspective, beliefs, and identity. Don't try to bring the two together because the two are not. It's not the same thing. They are totally the same thing. They are not the same thing. So stop using it to put us into problem and a lot of people. So that is it.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So I got a couple. One guy's coming late. Another two people are coming. They're getting their car fixed. So we'll just start. All right. So one of the things that I like to do, or we do, group. It depends. I'm still or everyone's still getting kind of like readjusted after the holidays. So like the group in India, they're going to start again next week. Some of the people in America are traveling. People are coming back. So, but normally we have a pretty good group on Arab Shabbos from around the world. And so, like one of the ideas that we focus on is just like it's various different ideas. But right now, we've been focusing a lot on tefillah. And what I do is that I bring a lot of different sources, right? So there's different styles of teaching. The yeshiva that I went to, I started at Or Sameach, which is a yeshiva here in Israel, and it's very like academic, right? And so we were exposed. I was there the first yeshiva I was at. I was there for like 4.5 years, almost 5 years, And the only reason why I wasn't there full time after that because I got married, right? And so the dynamic there is like it was literally day and night. Literally, like I would wake up in the morning, grab my Gemara, go to yeshiva, and I wouldn't come back until it was dark, and that went on for almost like 5 years. And so, and so, but in that process, that type of learning, a big emphasis outside of the Gemara was Jewish literature, right? And so we would learn how to learn different, different Sfarim, different Sfarim from different times in history, different rabbis, different this. So just like everybody, we would touch on a little bit, right? So it was like it would be considered what you call a Litvish yeshiva, which is like the Litvish style of learning, which is like very kind of like very Gemara, very like exact type of a thing. But we also had that emphasis of Jewish literature, right? And so with me, which is different than some rabbis, only have like a specific, like some rabbis are like, hey, I'm Hasidus. I learn Chassidut, so they only learn Chassidut. Some people say, "Hey, I'm Breslov," so they learn Breslov. Some people are into just like whatever modern orthodoxy, whatever. Everyone has they only learn contemporary rabbis. You know what I'm saying? So for me, I learn from everybody. I don't have I just learned Sephardi rabbis or I only learn this type of. I learn from all the accepted rabbanim throughout history, and I draw from that. So one of the things that we've been learning from is Rabbi Cook and Otinel, welcome to the class. Actually, Otinel is probably for sure my strongest student. And Otinel, this is Daniel. Daniel is one of the leaders in with the Nigerian youth. Maybe can you hear me, Otinel? Are you there? Okay. Oh, he's in the office. Okay, he's just listening in. Anyways, so the point is that one of the things that we've been learning is we went on a process of starting to learn tefillah, and we bring Rabbi Cook. So Rabbi Cook was one of the first he was one of the first chief rabbis of Israel, and he was known. I mean, he's an Ashkenaz rabbi, but he was known for really like bringing different parts of Judaism together that weren't necessarily together. Like for example, there were people who came to Israel and they had very nationalistic views, right? They wanted to come, they came to Israel, and their outlook was like, hey, nation state, this, we're not religious, we're secular, blah blah blah, these types of things. And so he was like a rabbi that connected to all those different frames, right? But at the same time, I mean, he connected. He was religious. He was like he's. If you see Rabbi Cook, he's like wearing a shtreimel, right? And um, he's wearing a shtreimel. He's that type of guy. But at the same time, he was still considered a religious Zionist, right? And so religious Zionists, and I mean, I'm sure you've heard about it, you know about it too, whatever. But religious Zionist is, in essence, people who believe in the state, but they also believe in halakha as the basis, right? Even though Israel's not a religious state, it's still like the outlook is like the school of thought that I was trained in was a school of thought that they really weren't very connected to the state at all, right? They were like, hey, we're over here, we're waiting for Mashiach. Yes, there's a state, they're doing whatever they do. We're not concerned. We're learning, we're living in a religious community, and whatever happens with the state happens with the state. That was their school of thought. And there's other Jews that are what they call religious Zionists that 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 say, hey, you know what? We believe in the state and we also believe in the halakha as well, right? And so Rabbi Cook became a very controversial figure because he was one of the first people to kind of like really bring that together. And so a lot of the people who were religious really were against him. Anyways, so but he was still like he's a legend, you know what I mean? Like the people who are, the people who are here in Israel, anybody who believes in the state of Israel and the spirituality of the state, everyone quotes Rav Kook, right? So that being said, he's a Kabbalist, he's a Talmudist, he's a brick genius person. So that being said, so he wrote an amazing essay on prayer, right? And so this essay that he wrote on prayer, we started from the beginning. It has 4 parts to it, and so we're on the 4th part, which is a whole new part. So it's not like if you didn't read the other parts, you won't understand it. You know what I'm saying? It's not that type of a read, but you will benefit more if you did read the other parts, obviously. But this is kind of like the 4th part of it, and it really brings like and he has a unique style of writing too, by the way. So a lot of the ways he writes is very poetic. It's like very Israel, it's like you're like sitting in the woods and you're just writing and all these thoughts are coming to you, and you can really see that in his style of writing versus other writers, in different parts of the world or whatnot. So we're going to learn some Rav Kook. How you doing, Brandon? You good? Okay. Okay, so we always need a
Shalom.
shalom, shalom,
Shalom, bro.
shalom.
Just a lot of prep work before Sabbath right now. It's just I'm tuning in while cutting a little grass and washing clothes.
Oh wow, 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 wow. Okay, okay. The thing is, just before you go on, and I said this like a couple weeks ago, like at a Shabbat meal. It was actually before. It was a Shabbat, I think, going into the holidays, right? But one of the things people don't realize is that every single thing that a person does that's preparing for Shabbat is a mitzvah. Everything that you do. If you're walking to the store to buy groceries, every step that you take is a mitzvah. When you go and purchase the groceries, when you're looking at the groceries, when you pay for it, when you're driving, when you come back home, you cooking this, you're washing everything, this, you're cutting the grass. All these things are mitzvahs, right? So it's really important, while we're doing these things, is to keep in mind that these are all acts of serving God. And that's one of the most beautiful things, I really have experienced here in Israel. When I first got here, what blew me away was like the big stampede crowds that were out doing the Arab Shabbos, like before Shabbos shopping, Everyone's shopping, everyone's doing it. And I think to myself, it's like the only reason why all these thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people are out getting prepared all throughout Israel is because of the commandment, right? And it's a fascinating thing to see entirely. I'm talking about streets packed of people, and it's only because of the mitzvah. It's only because of the commandment of keeping Shabbat. And what is the main concept of Shabbat, right? And this is something that a lot of people, overlook, right? So let's connect to this light of Shabbat before we go into tefillah. So the thing about Shabbat, right, is fulfilling the commandment, right? Does anybody know the commandment that we're fulfilling when we keep Shabbat? Anybody know?
What
No.
did you say? What did
I
you say
said
again?
I said the commandment when we do Shabbat. What is the commandment that we are fulfilling? The 10 Commandments. Which one of those commandments are we fulfilling when we do Shabbat?
The fourth commandment.
Which says,
Remember and keep the Shabbat. Yaakov
yeah,
v'Shamor.
exactly. So we have to go back in history, right? So we have to go back and see this experience on Mount Sinai and understand that Mount Sinai, Har Sinai, was an opening in the cosmos, right? And we're getting to that place. We're walking right now in history. Our ancestors were walking in the desert, getting closer and closer to this process of revealment, which was Mount Sinai. And so on that opening in the cosmos, what God did on that opening of the cosmos, he says that he gave us all these different vibrations, these utterances, right? But underneath these vibrations, what was going on? These words, this was energy, right? And then, us who know a little bit of Kabbalah could understand that these 10 commandments are connected to the 10 spheros, right? And the 10 spheros are expressions of the way that God's light emanates into this world, right? From Keter, Chokmah, Bina, Hesed, Gevurah, Teferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, Malchut, right? This whole process of how the light is revealed is explained through understood through these 10 different dimensions, right? So when we see the 10 commandments, we have to connect them to the 10 dimensions, because the 10 dimensions are expressing the energy force that emanates from the Creator. Now, on our simple level as human beings, they came down as words, they came down as commandments, but these are the systems of how the world is designed. Like, for example, so if like say you watch a basketball game, right? You watch a basketball game. I don't know, maybe in Africa, maybe you guys watch soccer. I don't know, but we have NBA basketball, and in basketball, there's always these debates. Who's the best? Is it Michael Jordan? Is it LeBron James? Who is it? Who's these things? Blah blah blah. Is it Magic Johnson? All these Johnsons, right? But the point is just saying this is the debate, right? So imagine taking all the best athletes, right, that ever played basketball, and you put them on a court, and you gave them a basketball, but they had no rules, right? There's no rules. You took all the rules out, but you have them on the court, and they're all there, and they have a ball, and they have all this tremendous ability. What would happen is you blow the whistle and say, start the game, and the clock will start going, and it will be utter chaos. This guy would run this way, this guy would run that way, this guy would do this guy that, this guy, he'll shoot it over there, this guy shoots it over there. There's no rules. It's just chaos, right? And so this process of chaos, this process of chaos is a dynamic that God didn't want us to have, right? Like this concept of tohu vuhu, right? The second parsha, the Torah starts as Bereshis Barahim El Shemayim Va'aretz, right? And then the second verse says Ve'ha'aretz Hayata tohu vuhu, right? And the world was in chaos, right? The world was in chaos. And then what's the next verse after that? Vayomer Elohim Ve'ahior Ve'ahior, right? And then there was light. So this concept of rules is the basis of having clarity of what God wants and how we connect to the proper system. So in the game of basketball, if you took the best athletes and you have no rules, you have chaos. None of their abilities and none of their uniqueness and none of those gifts that we were able to see through a game that has rules manifest, right? Shaquille O'Neal is a great athlete, humongous person, but without rules, we'll never be able to appreciate his discipline or his stamina or his consistency. Same thing with Michael Jordan, LeBron James. So the whole concept of these rules creates a structure that we could participate into reality. So when we talk about the 10 commandments, we're talking about 10 energy porters that are expressed through rules or commandments, right? So when we talk about the fourth commandment, what we're talking about is a particular light that we manifest in this world, right? Because there's light and then we're the vessel, right? God gives light and we receive it. The sun gives light, the moon receives it, right? So we receive God's light, and that's why I'm alive, able to talk to you, and that's why you're able to talk to me, right? And so when we keep Shabbat, right? When we keep Shabbat, when we remember Shabbat and we make it holy, right? Zikaron and Mikadesh, right? When we remember and we make it holy, right? Then from that standpoint, we manifest that energy from Mount Sinai. That same light that existed during that time, the most highest connection that human beings ever have, we have access to that light every single week when we keep Shabbat. So how do we open this door of Shabbat, right? So say a person like Daniel, a person like Otino, a person like Brandon, they come in and they say, hey, you know what? There's this guy that I'm talking to. He wants to learn about Shabbat. How does he get involved? How does he start this process of Shabbat? So the way that we institute it is through the wisdom of the sages, right? We have a tradition, like, and this is a challenge that people have, with the Gemara, right? The wisdom of the sages. They think the rabbis just invented these ideas, but rather the rabbis learned it from their teachers, and their teachers, and their teachers, and their teachers, all the way back to Moshe Rabbeinu. They didn't invent anything. Now they described, they articulated in the words of their time 100%, but none of it is invention, right? And so the dynamic of how the sages say the original concept, right? And we're talking about a lot of this is post-temple times, right? Because during the temple times, it was different. We were at a different level of energy. We're at a different consciousness. The Shekhinah was there. We had organization. So sometimes when people look at Judaism, they're like, "Oh, well, that's not what they did during the times of the temple." That was something that they understood later. Yeah, we're not in the temple anymore. We're in diaspora. We're in the galut. So when we lost the temple, the first time we went into Babylon, right? And when we went there, a lot of things were refined and understood. Principles were refined to be able to be expressed outside of not living in an environment where you have temples, you have temple sacrifices, you have all these things going on, right? And so during those times, we didn't have Kohanim, we didn't have the Levine, we didn't have the altar, we didn't have the communal settings and the courtyards and all these things and the horns blowing and all these different things. So the sages had to take principles and allow these principles to be applicable to today, right? Or at least to those times, that generation. And then the generations after that took the same principles, and from there, they derive law. Like, for example, we have things like genetic cloning today, right? We have space travel. We have, different types of the disease. You have artificial insemination. You have different types of surgeries, right? So how do we deal with these things from a halakhic perspective? We can say, oh, well, you know what? The sages during the temple, they didn't really talk so much about open heart surgery. So or a heart transplant? Right? Can a Jewish person take a heart transplant from a non-Jew? Right? How do you know? So the sages, our poskim, our judges, they go into these principles that have similar scenarios, right? And then from there, they're able to build an understanding that allows. So that's not a person inventing anything. That's a person describing how this could be applied based off of the traditions that we've had prior. In this case, thousands of years. So with that being said, the whole concept, the way that we start the manifestation, right? The way that we start the manifestation is through lighting candles, right? And the sages teach that we light two candles. We light one candle that represents the remembrance of Shabbat, and we light the other candle that represents the concept of making Shabbat holy, right? Now, once we're not gonna know all the halakha right now, right? Lighting candles, obviously we know it represents, the beginning of Shabbat and all these different types of things, right? But that's how we do that. That's how we start that process, right? And then afterwards, right? The next thing that we do to manifest that idea is the reciting of Kiddush, Friday night Kiddush. So how does Friday night Kiddush manifest the idea of remembrance and to make holy, right? So let's look at it. I have it in front of me. So it starts with, it says Yom Hashichi, right? Vayakulu, it says Vayakulu, hold on, sorry, just 1 second. because we still got to learn Rabbi Cook, but we got to address the things on the table, right? Okay. So, all right. So anyway, so this is one of my favorite melodies. This is my personal melody. So on Shabbat night we start with Yom HaShishi on the sixth day. Vayakulu Hashemayim ve'ha'aretz ve'kol sifa'am vayakol Elohim bayom hashvi melotod asher asa vayishbod bayom hashvi mikol melotod asher asa vayivarek. So anyway, so this is actually the end. This is the end of the 6 days of creation, right? And this is basically saying Elohim la yasod, and God was finished, right? And so that idea is the idea of remembrance, right? Because we're going back in the day. We're going back in the day, right? So when we say Yom HaShishi, we're remembering the whole dynamic, right? Now, the next part after that, we say Savrim Mananam, right? Get everyone's attention, and everyone says L'chaim, right? To life. And then we say the blessing, Bere Pri HaGefen, right? So what's going on there? Where's the Bere Pri HaGefen come from, right? So the sages instituted that when we recite this benediction, this testimony, this edut, that this is the 6th day of creation, and then this is what's going on, and God finished creation, and we finished creating for the week. When we do that, they said when we sing that, we should accompany it with wine. Because wine is chashav. It wasn't always like this, by the way, right? This is after the temple was destroyed, wine was instituted. It's a fascinating history when you look at how, I think it was during the Gionim period, that the generation of the pair, I think it was during that generation they instituted the idea of adding wine as a way to making like adding kind of like a certain decadence, a certain elevation to it, right? So we're reciting this over the wine, right? And wine obviously represents a lot of deep things. It's also very much connected to the beginning of creation, Noah, building the vineyard, the whole thing. And so that's and then this in the second part is actually like a full-on bracha, right? The first part is just pasukim. The second part is a bracha, right? Baruch atah Hashem, Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzah banu v'shabbat kadsho, right? Shabbat kadsho ve'ahava v'raton hine kalanu zikaron le'maseh bereshit. So it incorporates this idea of the beginning of creation and the earth. Tequila lemikra kodesh, right? This is the part. Zacher lesiyat mitraim. So we're also remembering the exodus of Egypt. Ve Shabbat kat shakat. And he made the Shabbat holy. Be'ahava uraton nehina kalazanu. So it says, so with love and with its will, is ratzon. It's all this is such a gift, and it ends with mikadesh hashabbat. So when you recite these words, we have fulfilled the mitzvah again of remembering and making holy. And even the first part, right? When we say Vayikula Shemayim Va'aretz, even that is inside of the prayer in the Amida that we say in Shul, right? But the point is knowing why we're saying this. Every aspect of remembering Shabbat is connecting to the power of those 10 vibrations that exist. The sages say that the power of Shabbat is so great and so humongous, right? So humongous and so great that it's as if a person who keeps Shabbat is as if they kept all of the Torah, all the commandments of the Torah, right? So let's understand that. What does it mean, all the aspects of the Torah, right? We talked about this a little bit last week, right? When we were talking in our last class, I don't remember so many classes, but we talked about, I bring, this is so important, and if you heard me say it again, I might probably say it another 1,000 times. But we have this idea, Rabbi Chaim Vital, right? He wrote a book, Shari Kedusha. Yeah, I think we talked about this a few days ago. He wrote Shari Kedusha, and he explains that the concept of Adam, right? We hear about Adam, the first man. He explains the first man, Adam, is what? The first man, Adam, in essence, is the neshama that was blown inside of the goof, that body. It's not the body itself. The living creature was not Adam, but rather the soul that is inside of that physical body is Adam. And that soul, that neshama, or the ruach, as is explained, that aspect of man has 613 parts. If you could imagine, I mean, what does the soul look like? We don't know, but the Torah tells us, the sages tell us, that there's 613 parts of the soul. And the physical body also has 613 parts, 248 limbs, 365 organs and tissues and all these other things. This is what makes up the human body, the human spiritual experience, right? And so that's what we're doing, right? That's the concept. And so the soul receives light from the Creator. And as it receives light, that light infuses those 248 limbs and those 365 other aspects of themselves, right? It fuels that, right? And so that fueling of that connects the human being to the 613 parts that make up the physical reality. There's 613 parts of the Shekhinah, right? And the Shekhinah, the expression of reality is from the Shekhinah. And so that goes in all parts of creation. So as the person receives light from the Creator and fuels their body with this spiritual light, this spiritual light connects them to the physical creation. And so as a person goes against the Torah, they cut themselves off from that spiritual light, or they stop that spiritual light from coming in. Thus, the limbs in the body are not there, or not being fed, or not receiving light, and so they start to decay. And because they're not receiving light, they're not connecting to creation. And that's why you see, like, when the soul's not there, the body decays. That's my proof. Prove it. When the soul leaves the body, if we know anybody who's passed away, hopefully none of us, hopefully you guys don't, but if you do, I personally have known people who passed away. And I could tell you that the difference is that the physical body was not, the physical body did not have a soul. And that soul, and not having that soul, in essence, right? Not having that soul is why the body decayed. So when we talk about this concept, so when the Torah says keeping Shabbat, right, is this keeping all the precepts of the Torah, that means that by keeping Shabbat, all 613 limbs are able to receive the light, because certain mitzvahs, that's the horn here. I got to get ready for Shabbat. Sorry, we didn't get a chance to go into it. But anyway, we'll keep going for a minute. I don't, can you guys hear that? Maybe not. But in Jerusalem, there's like this really loud horn that that the whole town, all of Jerusalem hears. And that tells us we have like 40 minutes before Shabbat. You guys do 18 minutes, we have 40 minutes before Shabbat in Jerusalem. What are you going to say, Daniel?
No, I'm here. I'm listening to you.
Oh, okay, cool. And so anyways, okay, so when we talk about this idea of keeping Shabbat, we're talking about this idea of when we talk about this idea of keeping Shabbat, it's this idea of the fact that you're fulfilling all the precepts of the Torah, right? And as you fulfill all the precepts of the Torah, you are fueling your whole body. So that's why they say Shabbat is a renewal, right? Shabbat is where you elevate to a new consciousness. You get a new start. You're completely filled with light. Now you understand how it works, right? And so this concept of Shabbat, this concept of keeping Shabbat, is the idea of knowing that we are fulfilling all the precepts of the Torah, which means is that all of our bodies, because you got to understand, when we talk about the mitzvahs, right? If we're saying that the mitzvahs bring light, in each mitzvah, each part of the body represents one of the precepts, right? One of the mitzvahs, every mitzvah that we have 613 body parts, we have 613 mitzvahs. So that means each of the mitzvahs are connected to different parts of the body, right? Some mitzvahs are connected to, say, the brain. Some are more connected to the hands. Some mitzvahs are connected to the feet. Some of the mitzvahs are connected to all different types of things, all different types of physical components that we have, right? All those different physical components that we have, the mitzvahs match up to that. And that's why back in the day, like when people got sick, they didn't go to doctors. They went to a spiritual sage in their community, and that spiritual sage will say, hey, you know what? You need to do this. You need to do that. You need to do this mitzvah. You need to read this part of the Torah, because they were trying to fix the blockage between the soul and the physical body. And that's how sickness used to be understood within the Jewish world. You know, I mean, they had certain remedies, certain plants, but like nothing like we see today in medicine, right? And so the point is to say that this concept of fueling your neshama, right? This concept of being totally connected to this process of Shabbat is to understand what is happening. This light in the keeping of Shabbat literally fills our soul completely, all the parts of our entire soul and our entire body. And so that's why when a person is preparing for Shabbat, they need to understand, if you're picking something up, it's not just that you did a mitzvah. It means that the parts of the body that were used, right? The parts of the body that were used to fulfill that mitzvah receive light. So like say you have to pick up a box. You know, I got to move this box over. I'm cleaning the house, whatever. The back, all the muscles, all the joints, the arms, everything that you do is receiving light. When a woman's making challah, her hands, her intellect, her eyes, everything she's using to fulfill this mitzvah is receiving light from the Creator. And so those are in specific parts, right? But on Shabbat, everything is fulfilled, right? So I want to read a little bit of that. I went a little bit on the point of Shabbat. I know Daniel's interested about it, and Brandon's involved in preparation for Shabbat. So yeah, but that's the point, is to understand that this interconnected process that we have, the body, the soul, the body, and the physical world. And so we have this gift called the Torah, and the gift of the Torah is a technology, right? It's a technology that allows us to bridge the gap between our soul's needs, God's desires, and the body and all of creation. So the Torah and the mitzvot are a spiritual technology. It's not religion. It's a spiritual technology that was given to our ancestors on Mount Sinai. And that spiritual technology allows us to connect to the light force of the Creator. The human eye sees less than 1% of reality, right? And there's a whole 99% happening around us all the time. The human eye is only able to see only glimmers of light. And it doesn't even see, it absorbs. The eye absorbs, right? Like a sponge. It absorbs light particles, and the light particles go in the back of the brain, and those images are formed, right? And so the images that are formed, right, in the back of the brain become our reality. That's what when you're looking around right now, this is based off of the images in your brain, or the information that's in your brain that corresponds to these light particles. But the same thing goes for our hearing. The same thing, the hearing is just, we are getting like waves and vibrations and winds, but the mind is determining what we're hearing. When we talk this mind, we're just hearing voice vibrations. We're making out what they mean. That's why sometimes you may not even speak a language, right? I don't speak the best Hebrew, but I can understand when people are speaking to me. How? Because the mind is able to articulate. Same thing with taste. Same thing with touch. All of these things go into the mind and the mind decides. But that's not the full reality. And this is the power, this is our challenge, is the ego, right? The ego wants to say, what I see, what I taste, what I smell, all this is the reality. This is the truth of what's going on. The way I see another person, that's who they are. That's the truth, right? And so that ego is not true because we only have a limited understanding of what reality is going on around us. Don't ask me, ask the quantum physicists. Go and ask all the scientists. Does the human eye see everything that's going on, or it only sees a glimmer? On Rosh Chodesh, which is the beginning of the month, we only see a little bit of a slither of the moon. And every day it gets bigger and bigger. But in the beginning, when we start, we only see a little bit. This is our relationship with the Torah. Because in reality, we only see a little bit. But as we learn, we can see so much more, but not with our regular eyes, but with our spiritual eyes. Our spiritual eyes, our spiritual nose, our spiritual nose, and our spiritual ears. And we're able to see and hear more. Why? Because the wisdom of the Torah is teaching us about a reality that we cannot see with our five senses. That's bigger than our five senses. And so from that place, we have to humble ourselves and use the Torah as a guidance because we can't see. The person who thinks he can see and understands what's going on around him totally without any direction is a fool. What do you mean? What do you mean you understand? You see, the scientists would tell you themselves you can't. So if you can't see everything that's going on around you, where are you going? Where are you going? How are you going to get there? How are you going to get there? Where are you going? Well, I know. You met people like this. I don't need the Torah. I don't need the Bible. I know. I figured it out myself. I know. You don't know. If that was the case, no one would ever get divorced. If that was the case, every business you start would be successful. Right? You'll pick the right place to live. All the friends that you've ever had in your life would have been amazing people if you just knew. We don't know. Right? And so that's why we have to learn and we have to build our understanding about reality. This is not about religion. This isn't Christianity. This isn't Islam. And there's no disrespect towards those faith systems. But for us, we are working on from the soul's perspective. We need to know the totality or a bigger picture because that's the way that we make the decisions that feed our soul. That's it. We're here to feed our soul. And so that dynamic of that dynamic of that dynamic of understanding, where we're at, right? That dynamic of understanding where we're at is to deal with that challenge of, okay, you know what? I don't see everything that's going on. I don't know everything that's happening around me. I don't know why everything is happening around me, but I know that my perception of reality is extremely limited, right? My perception of reality is extremely limited. Now, the problem with the ego is that the ego comes in and says, no, that's not true. You know everything. You get it. What do you mean? You don't have to listen to anybody. That's the ego. So we have that challenge of accepting that we are limited. We can't see things. We can't smell. We can't touch. We can't hear only from a limited. The essence of things we'll never know, right? It's beyond our logic. And we have a very limited reality. And so our job is to say, if I accept that I have a limited reality, therefore I need to get information. I need to get information that allows me to connect to this bigger reality, right? And so that's what we're working on here. We're not here to be more religious. What do I need to be religious for? I don't need religion. I need technology to feed my soul. And the reason why we have the challenges that we have in society is because the challenges that we have in society is because we have a society that doesn't even acknowledge the soul, right? When you go into any school, university, say Harvard, Yale, Cambridge, University of Lagos, whatever, the best universities in the world, none of them teach their students about the soul and how it functions, and the soul has needs. None of them. It's not even discussed. Forget about it. Western society has removed the soul from the conversation because they wanted to only have people who focused on the external self. Because as long as people focus on the external self, then the definitions of their life, right, would be it's subjective. Who am I? If I don't acknowledge myself as a soul first, if I'm a soul first, okay, I'm a creation of God. And this soul has some type of a purpose, or else why God would create it. But once you remove the soul out of the conversation, then I'm black, you're white, this person is Asian, this person's African, this person is Spanish. Who created these terms? Who created them? My ancestors didn't. And these terms that they created for us, who are these terms? Do they help us? Do they benefit us? If so, how? Maybe they don't. Maybe we are put in a society where where everyone perceives that they can see what the totality of reality is, and so I'm able to look at another person and judge them, and you're able to look at me and judge me, and we all judge each other, and we all separate, and we all have our things. And guess who we need to protect us? The government, some institution. As human beings, we can't love each other because you're different than me. I make more money than you do. My car is different than yours. I'm taller than you. I'm shorter than you. My eyes are lighter. My eyes are darker. We have all these things that separate us because we are taught the basis of who we are is the external. How many fruits look amazing outside but internally are rotten? And then how many fruits are perfectly fine on the inside, but they fell, maybe someone stepped on it or whatever. And it's not so pretty on the outside, but inside. So this is one many things that Hashem is giving us all the time. So, anyways, Shabbat's here. We didn't get a chance to get so much into the tefillah of Rabbi Cook, but we are starting Sunday. We're going hard. We're going to go very focused. We're starting a class next week. Anybody who wants to join, it's a pretty advanced class, but I'm going over all the whole system of the laws of purity. And looking at the purity of how a woman and wife lives with each other, how they deal with their menstrual cycle, how they deal with the process of purification before and after. How does the man deal with it? So we're going to go through that to give out those tools for people to live more purified. Most people already know it. They learned these things, as they got married. But hey, it's always good to refine ourselves. So we'll stop here. Any last points, any ideas, any statements on anything?
Shalom, Chief Rabbi, and Brother Daniel. I think that that was a really good point on how you broke down the Kedusha for Friday night, and how it's based off of the main mitzvah, and then it's like broken down. It's like added on to sanctify it to perform the other parts of the mitzvah. And
Definitely.
and it's really fascinating to see how it's laid out that way, how it's structured from top to bottom.
100%. And the thing is, hold on a second. So the point is saying that on that point, The point on that point that you just said, the thing about it is like this. It's like one of the greatest adventures of learning is learning the halakha. Learning the halakha, learning how it developed over time, how the sages in different generations saw it, how they responded to it, all the stuff. It's like it's the most fascinating, interesting thing because you're seeing God's laws. You know what I'm saying? And we're seeing like how do we apply God's law in this situation, in that situation, in this thing? How do they apply it in this condition? So a lot of the times I read a lot, and I've done classes with this, is read a lot of what they call halakhic responses. So we just recently, I think maybe you were in one of the classes, but we finished just doing what is the halakha outlook on veganism, right? So we just did that. Before that, we did what is the halakhic outlook on teaching non-Jews Torah, right? Also fascinating. Before that, we did the halakhic responses on preemptive war, right? So how does that work? What does the Torah say about it? So all these things are fascinating things, but there's so many subjects to address. But the point is, the benefit of seeing that is seeing how the sages throughout history applied halakha, how they understand it, how they understand it in a contemporary context. Where's this the connections, disconnections? So yeah, I'm very much that. I'm like a halachic guy. That's my whole thing, and the cases, and I spend so much time with it. So we'll go on that adventure. But yeah, this is what empowers us. The Torah, obviously, is our kedusha. It fills our soul. At the same time, it's a halacha that allows us to fully bind ourselves with God. And the more we fall in love with the halacha and how the halacha works, from there we would have a whole completely different relationship with God and society. Because you'll be able to walk outside. It's like it's a trip for me because I've been here for so long, and like I haven't seen a movie in 7-8 years. You know what I'm saying? And so sometimes when I'm watching like a clip on YouTube of like some type of a show or movie clip, or even just in general, you can see how many halakhic violations that exist. They're not Jewish, so it doesn't matter. You know what I'm saying? But it's just saying you still look at it like even now, like if I see someone pick up a burger, right, and they just eat it and they don't say a hamotzi or they don't wash their hands, it's like whoa, like people do that, like it's like that thing. So, anyways, we'll continue on next week Sunday. We start in the morning and we do at least two or three, depending. But we're going to definitely expand it. But next week I'm going to give the times for Tahara Mishpacha, the laws of family purity, and we should have success. You guys should have a beautiful Shabbat. And it's just so much. I mean, we got the weekly parsha next week. We're getting ready. We're in the week of Tiferet on the Omer. I mean, it's just we're getting ready for Har Sinai. We have so much work to do to prepare our vessels to receive these lights. So, with God's will, we'll continue on and have another amazing week of learning. Baruch atah Adonai leolam, amen ve'amen.